Hello, everybody. Welcome to 3 Point Perspective, the podcast about illustration, how to do it, how to make a living at it, and how to make an impact in the world with your art. I'm Jake Parker.
I'm Lee White.
And I'm Will Terry. And all three of us are professional illustrators. We've all worked for all the major publishers in the business. Together, we've published somewhere around 75 children's books. And we've all taught illustration at university art schools.
Yes, that's true. I was reading. Each week we come at you guys with fantastic illustrator interviews or questions from people just like you. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we argue, but each time you learn something brand spanking new.
Glad you could join us for the podcast today, Lee.
I was reading the questions for the podcast. It was situational. It was relevant.
Right before this too. So
man.
Yeah, we don't even want to talk about that anymore.
So what's going on, Lee?
Oh, I wanted to talk about something that happens a lot in illustration. And, you know, you guys, if you're by yourself, I mean, illustration, we've talked about it before, is a very solo activity. You're at home by yourself a lot. And that's why we have liked our community so much to be able to chat about this stuff. But you're still by yourself quite a bit. And a lot of your business, you know, you're not sharing wins and losses with other people that much because everybody's just on such a specific individual road. But I wanted to share, I applied for the Cherry Creek Art Festival, and I applied twice under two different sort of painting styles. I didn't go for the Antonio Banderas different name, but the judges can't see the names anyway. They're just looking at the work, and you have to submit a booth photo. I got rejected on both of them. Not even waitlist. Last year I got waitlisted on both of them, so I was like, "Oh, I'm pretty good," you know. I mean, now granted, there's 80 spots and there's 800 plus people applying, maybe more.
Yeah.
So it's tough. I mean, I know that it's a numbers game, but I didn't even get waitlisted this year, and just wanted to talk about how rejection is part of the deal here. It's not an exception; it's the rule. And I wanted to let people know that, you know, even after doing it for so long, and I think I've got a pretty good cohesive body of work, and I know what I'm doing when I'm submitting these applications, you know, just like we all know what we're doing now when we submit to publishers and this and that, there's always a gatekeeper, and it sucks, but it's a numbers game. And if you get used to it enough, it just rolls right off of you. I mean, it's just almost a joke in a sort of a way, but I just wanted to bring it up because you may think like, oh, in the beginning part of my career, I'm going to get all these rejections. I'll achieve a certain amount of success and that won't happen anymore. And I'm here to tell you it will happen your entire life. I consider, I'd be curious to what you guys think about this ratio. I'm just making it up. But if I send out 10 things, my just internal kind of expectation is one of them will work. Whether it's a class that I'm running, whether it's a product I'm making, whether it's art fairs that I'm applying for. If I apply to 10 art fairs, I expect to get in one.
that is, you just described the life of an entrepreneur. We failure is something we're very comfortable with. We become very, very comfortable with it, and we learn so much from it. Well, let me say this: like my suspicion why you didn't get in is more, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but like you're very established in the illustration world, but I'm assuming you have less of a name. Your work is great in the more fine art world, but I would imagine that they're choosing people that have like won tons of awards in the art field and stuff. So it's not. No,
it's random. In that, I think you're totally right in terms of if you're a gallery artist and showing in a established brick and mortar gallery, that is absolutely, they're reading the resume, they're looking at, but these judges cannot see who's submitting.
Oh, okay.
They're just looking at the artwork, right?
It's anonymous, and it feels anonymous because like one year I got into the really high end Sausalito art show, and that was fantastic. It was my best show by far. And I was sort of banking on that. Okay, I can count on that money every year and that show. And I never got in again. So it's just one of those things. Now, I do think there's some politics where they start recognizing, oh, that's Bill's work. Let's let him in. You know, like it's for lack of a better term, an old boys network, and they know who's involved. So there's a little bit of that, of
I'm
course.
going through the website that shows all the artists that are, I guess, submitting or not submitting, but are a part of the festival.
Yeah, who got
this year.
in.
And I'm looking at it. I should probably share my screen here, because this is I'm trying to see where you would fit in to this crowd. And part of me is like, oh, your work is such a balance to all of this that it makes perfect sense to have you in and among these. You really would kind of stand out. But in another sense, do they want people who really stand out? Are you not quite the vibe that they're going for?
Well, I mean, it just depends on the judges. It's a rotating cast of judges.
Mm-hmm.
And then like one year I used to get in Art in the Pearl all the time in Portland. It's a really great show. And then one year I got rejected. We went to the actual show to check it out. Oh, look at that vase. That's so cool.
That thing?
Yeah, both of those things are really cool right there. But we went to the show and it was all landscapes. I mean, it was 100% landscapes, and not even really creative landscapes. It was just like the most typical looking art landscape, very sort of generic in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the leaning that the judges had that year. I don't know, but my point is I'm used to it. And I applied, by the way, with 3 different styles two different styles in this one. So more fine art style with the oil painting stuff that I was doing 2 years ago. They don't know that it's not current. and then a watercolor style. And it just is what it is. But I told Jake and Will this morning, I consider myself to be like if you guys saw Spirited Away, that creature that starts eating everything and then ends up in the bathhouse and just is like consuming it. That's how I am with rejection letters. Like that's my go-to in my head. Like I want them, give them to me, because what happens with a rejection is it means that I've applied. Mm-hmm. I'm only in control of the application or making something or doing something. And I can't control really its success. I wanted everything to be successful, but you just don't know. I mean, just like Will's doing games. There's no way to know. Jake's doing graphic novels. There's no total way to know. But you still got to do it. You put the stuff out in the world, and that's where I measure whether I was successful or not necessarily whether I get into the thing.
Right, because that's the gatekeeper versus the market deciding whether they like your stuff.
Correct.
Like in an alternate universe, if they had let you in versus not. So in the reality, you don't get in, but in another one, you get in. And what if you sell more than everyone else? That's a possibility, right?
It absolutely is. I mean, at the show in Sausalito, I did better than almost everyone. There was a photographer I know who did better than me, but I sold almost everything in my booth. I mean, it was a perfect show. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I thought, well, I've been very successful here. They came by my booth and saw that all the stuff was gone. And so I was like, oh, they're seeing that people like it. And so I assumed that would be a metric that would maybe carry me forward, but it didn't.
Well,
and so
it actually hurt you. One of those guys from Sausalito was
maybe. I mean, yeah. I mean, that's
sucking the life out of the room.
There's gatekeepers everywhere, and it drives me crazy that we have to deal with the gatekeepers, but you do. And so ultimately my advice here is try to do the things that have gatekeepers. Apply to jobs. I got rejected for another job this week too, by the way. So it was a week of sort of rejections. And then, applying for all this stuff where there's gatekeepers and you may get the rejection. I'm fully aware of that. But then the other half of my business or more is I'll just make the thing. What's funny about this, I want to leave this on a positive note because I got these 2 rejections this week. At the same time, I get a $2,000 print order with no commission, with no gatekeeper, with no nothing.
Yeah.
So
it's amazing.
And so it makes me laugh at the people that reject it because the work is selling. It does sell. It works. And they just say no.
If you wanted to do nothing but these art shows, like let's say, you just decided, Will and Jake, you're on your own. I'm just going to do art shows, right?
Yeah.
How are there enough that if you got into 10 or 20% of them, you could stay busy?
Oh, heck yeah. I mean, and that's what people do is they'll, if you want to get in 10, you apply to 100 and then you'll go around the country. I mean, some people again are pros at it, and then maybe they have better techniques than I do for getting accepted more. I don't know. But some people make their
Same
whole
thing.
life on it.
Same thing's happening with Comic Cons. It's the exact same thing. It's just a different facade in front of everything. One is, the comics industry. This one's the more fine art, or in the case of this, it's I need some cool jewelry for a present, an anniversary gift for my wife or something like that, or I need to furnish my cabin up at Breckenridge, and we need 5 pieces of art and a couple of sculptures or something like that. The other thing I was going to say, Lee, this is something we were talking about this, a friend of mine, and he's like, you can't control, it's a roll of the dice. You can't control what numbers the dice land on, but you can control how often you roll the dice.
Right.
So,
that's good.
And so, if you're just like, man, I rolled it once and I didn't get in, I guess I'm done. Or I rolled it 20 times and look, I got in, that's completely up to you. And you can kind of make your own luck that way.
Now, once you're in one of those shows, can you renew for the next year, or do you have to reapply every year?
You got to reapply, and it's brand new. It's a different jury. It's like you weren't even in it.
So in that sense, it's not like a comic convention where if once you're in, they let you renew.
Oh, that would be way better.
I feel like
actually be careful what you wish for, because there's a lot of people that they let renew that they shouldn't have let in the first place.
Yeah.
And so the shows end up looking the same every year. The
Here's
same
the thing,
people
though,
are there.
You thinking about this and looking at this, like I just typed in art festivals in Arizona, and there's, I want to say 10 in the next 2 weeks, right? So there's the Two-Back Arizona Festival of the Arts. There's the Kierland Art and Soul Festival. There's the 66th annual. Oh, that's the same as the Two-Back one. There's the Arts and Crafts Festival in Mesa, Arizona. There's the Chandler Arts and Wine Festival. Like you can, there's it seems like there's no end to these, but you have to probably pick and choose. Like some of these, who's actually attending them and what city are they in? Like I know Arizona, so if there's an arts festival in Scottsdale where all the rich people in Arizona
That's
live,
the one you want to be in.
That's the one you want to be in. If you want to be in the one in Mesa, you're more likely to get in, but maybe less likely to sell any big ticket items if you want. The other thing though is it's the same with cons, is that if you keep hitting up the same area every year after year, if you don't have anything new the next year, or anything new every 2 years or something like that, every time you're there, you're not going to sell as much, because people are just familiar with you. Oh, I already bought a book from this guy, or I already bought a print from this guy. I did my part of it's like I did my service. I don't need to like patronize this guy again.
Right. And I mean, it goes two ways, because sometimes they'll become a collector, but I agree with you in general principle, like it's a diminishing return at the same fair. And so the idea, if this is going to become part of your business model, is to cycle them every couple of years. And that's kind of what we were doing in Portland right at the end, because like I had already tapped out that market, so to speak. And so we started casting a bigger net, I guess, doing some different shows that we hadn't done. So that was good. But I'll tell you, my other reaction, just want to end it with this. My other reaction to getting the rejection letter from Cherry Creek is I applied to 10 more shows today. So if you think you can beat me, you cannot. I will keep applying and I will keep eating those rejection letters.
Do you have to pay to apply?
Yeah, that sucks. It's minimal, $35 for these higher end shows, but I do have a set of criteria for entering shows. I've done enough of them where they need to have a certain amount of attendance. Otherwise I'm not even interested in any way. It's got to be at least 75,000 people, which you wouldn't think there'd be that many people, but the big shows definitely get that many. And some of them get up to 200,000. And so those are the ones that they're on my top tier list. If you have a show that's like, 10,000 or fewer people coming through, your chances are slim that you're going to have a good weekend.
Right. Yeah. That's pretty smart. And I assume you just have like a sort of a planned budget for applying to festivals, right? Like after, you're just going to carve out $300 will be festival application money, and I know I'll get it
Right.
back if I get into
I mean,
to
the
one.
hard part about these high end ones is the booth fee is, oh my gosh, it's so painful. I mean,
What's a booth fee?
it goes between $800 for the minimum, and then up to $2,000 to $3,000.
Oh, so they know what they're doing. They know
They're making some money from those. I mean, the Sausalito show, I was $5,000 in before I even got in the car to drive down there. I mean, like that's how much we had paid. But all these ones I'm trying to do right now are semi close, and so one of the biggest costs is just lodging and doing all that stuff. So if you can stay at home, oh my goodness, that's a big time benefit.
I want to say, have you ever thought about running your own festival?
Well, we talked about it here at SVS. We were like, we saw somebody do it last or 2 years ago, and we were like, oh my gosh, that guy just figured out the whole thing. He just made his own and just sold everything.
Oh, what a nightmare. What an absolute logistical, like that has to become your life.
Yeah,
it does. I mean, it depends on what you want to do. Yeah,
everything comes at a cost, and so you have to decide. Like, there's only so much time in a day. You can only do so much.
Yeah, exactly. You got to figure out what you want to do in life.
What do you want to? Do you want to? It seems like every entrepreneurial idea you have, the business side of it just takes you further away from the art creation.
Yeah,
which is what we got into this thing for.
I want to shift gears here a little bit. There was a comment in the our SVS community. Someone posted. They posted a meme. So it's titled "See, Nobody Cares" with the crying laughing emoji. Did you guys see that post?
No.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, I did. Was the one with Jurassic Park?
Yeah, so it's the meme of Dennis Nedry from Jurassic Park. Yeah. He's the Newman from Seinfeld, and he's pointing at the guy who's like hiring him to like steal the information.
Right.
And he's pointing at him. He says, new art. We've got new art here. See, nobody cares, right? And this is Mike Schulten who posted it here, and he's just kind of lamenting that this day and age you post on Instagram and it's crickets. And I have seen a massive drop in engagement on Instagram unless I'm doing the song and dance stuff. Like if I'm take an hour out of my day to like record a reel and edit it together with the perfect music and everything, that can get some good views on it. But the old fashioned, here's a picture of what I drew in my sketchbook this morning, is a fraction of what it was, 5 or 10 years ago. Right.
People have TikTok brain. This is what I wrote to the guy. I'm like, when I grew up, there were 3 channels, and then there was a 4th when Fox came along.
Yeah.
And there was no cable TV. There was nothing. And then we had cable TV, and then there was all these channels, and then the internet came, and then we had even more, and then YouTube, and then Reels and TikTok, and so now it's like people are. I mean, there's just shiny stuff everywhere trying to get our attention, and you have to have something really, really interesting to say, really disruptive, in order to get someone's attention, and when you do figure that thing out, you got to really lean into it hard. And so you see these people with these bits that they're doing, couples and stuff that on Reels and stuff. And you're like, I wonder if they're able to monetize that, because you got my attention now, and you got me for 10 seconds or 15 seconds or 30 seconds. But what now? What do you do? How do you sell merch off of that?
Yeah.
And for an artist, like, what do you do to interrupt someone's day in a way? And really, I think the social media companies they've gotten it down to a science to where they'll really only let you pay to really put stuff in front of a lot of people, which is smart for them. Because when I was running my Facebook ads for Wicked Christmas, it worked amazingly well. But I had to pay for it.
Right.
Whereas when there was a time, I think, where we were, you'd post something, and if it was really cool, you could get thousands of likes, you could get, a lot of engagement, a lot of comments.
Yeah.
I think largely they don't put it in people's feeds like they used to either.
I think those days are over, and I think we're going back to little by little to 2000 to 2010 internet, uh, but a better way. And so I want to actually read what I responded to this guy. I really like I cracked my knuckles and like started typing up because I had some thoughts. But since 2001, you want to know how many art communities I've created an account, or online communities, whether they're art related or not, that I've created an account for the purpose of sharing my art and getting feedback from my art. You know how many I've done?
How many?
24. 24.
Wow.
Wow.
Essentially one a year. Now some of these I spent more time on, and there were some years where I didn't do, but there were some years where it was like, oh, I'm going to sign up for 2 or 3 of these things. So
Beam, was that one of them?
what, Bing?
Yeah, Beam. Was that
Beam.
called?
No, I did sign up for that one, but that was like really lasted for like a week
Yeah.
before it imploded. But early on, it was art forums. So like the Saigen forums, Eat Poo forum, conceptart.org forum, Bolt City, and the Drawing Board. And those were all like super niche online forums. So one was more for cartoons, one was more for comics, one was more for concept art. And so if you wanted to post concept art and get better at concept art, you would join the like conceptart.org forums, right? If you wanted to get better at comics, you were and build a community with fellow like starting comic artists, you would go to like Bolt City, Kazu's online forum. You were on there at one point, right, Lee?
Yep.
Yeah, way back in the day. So what was like the vibe in those early places, Lee? If you recall, and Will, were you online before your blog? Like, were you on forums and stuff like that before your blog? Or was
I
like
think
your
that was the
blog
first. That was like the first thing.
was your blog?
That and Facebook. Yeah.
Yeah. So you came in like late, like 2007 ish, right?
Mm-hmm.
So up until that point, before there really was social media, and you wanted to be around a community of people, it was going to these forums, these sort of like watering holes. Like all the animals from the jungle would come out and meet there, and no one would try to eat each other. You just like drink the water and then go back to your, to your environment. But yeah, what do you recall from that, Lee?
I barely remember it. I remember it being not super engaging. I mean, I remember it being there, and I remember being happy that it was there, but I don't remember a lot of interaction.
Okay, then you had a different experience than me. So my experience essentially was, the cadence of posting on one of those wasn't, you didn't have to like be posting every day to get noticed, because
Right.
these communities were like 500 to a couple thousand people. So if you posted a new piece of artwork once a week or once every other week, and then the rest of the time you were just commenting on other people's artwork, you were probably in and out in an hour in a day or less.
That's
You
true.
got to spend the rest of your time like drawing and creating or living your life, skateboarding or whatever. And then you can come back and just check up and say, oh yeah, here's a conversation, and add to it. It really wasn't like hyperactive. It was a nice, steady, like healthy pace, right? And that's, I think, why it was so good, because it was also somewhat private. You could grow and learn almost like you're in a nursery. Like, here's my artwork. You get good feedback. You update it. You post it again. People love it. You start building genuine friendships, not just fans, but genuine friendships, where you like, people's phone numbers, and you're texting. Or I guess back then we didn't really have cell phones, but you knew you maybe even go to like a meetup with this person at Comic-Con or something like that, right? And so that was good. Then came social media, and then the whole thing shift. People started leaving these communities because they're like, oh, Instagram, I could get 30,000 followers. I could post a picture and get 100 comments on it.
Mm-hmm.
but the quality of engagement suffered, right? And so what it was you'd get a bunch of fire emojis as a comment, right? That's fine. It's like good, it feels like a pat on the back. But what starts to happen, and I think I did this, and I think a lot of artists did this, is they started creating art to get those kinds of interactions, because that's what was being valued and that's what got more engagement, and less creating art that I think improved their abilities or leveled them up in a way that I think would be healthier. So like, why go make a children's book, and design your characters and put together a children's book when you could do, 10 fan arts on Instagram and get
Right.
100,000 eyeballs on it, right? There's sort of this trade-off that's been happening. And now what's going on is there's so many people, there's so much attention. Like Will said, you have to like really do a song and dance to get any sort of attention, that it's almost useless, especially if you're starting out. So there's a article that Cal Newport wrote, and he was talking about how it was really about how smaller brands, um, if you to that point in your art career where you can like have your own brand and start having a following, it actually makes more sense to, instead of expand out and build your team to like 10 people making YouTube videos and a social media manager, and you're putting together all this stuff, and you can actually just have as much success with less stress and overhead if you just stay a one-man operation and you post consistently but slower, right? But what he said, the way he described social media is perfect. He says, as social media continues to falter and stumble in its role as a unifying cultural force, its model of people volunteering their creative labor in return for uncompensated attention is beginning to lose its appeal. So I like the way he put that essentially social media's whole thing was, here, you volunteer, you draw a piece for free, and we will use that to get attention over here from other people so that we can advertise to them.
Mm-hmm.
And at first that seemed like a good trade-off because you get all these eyes on your artwork. But now you're still doing that, but you don't get all these eyes on your artwork. Plus now you have to pay them to get more eyes on your artwork.
Right.
And you're sucked into brain rot mode because you just post it and you're like, oh, what did everybody else post? And pretty soon you're watching reels about like somebody feeding a zebra in their car or something like that.
However, a little pushback on that, and maybe it's not even pushback, but like there are producers and there are consumers, and there are producers that consume,
Mm-hmm.
and there are consumers that produce.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, like there the majority of people on social media are just consuming.
Mm-hmm.
So they're
Right.
there, and we need to get in front of them still.
Mm-hmm.
So where he knocks, now we have to pay for it. Yep, just like we did back in the 50s, 60s, 70s on radio, TV, newspapers. You have to pay to play.
I mean, you're
Right.
still a business, right?
Yeah.
I
Not
mean, that's sort of the
necessarily,
way it works.
And there's platforms that are set, there's sort of these different business models set up, and one of them is you the entrepreneurial artist on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, you have to pay to get your stuff on in front of more people. But if you have any sort of ability to do YouTube, right, to do a video or to just show the creation of your art and to build out a fan base that way, YouTube's the reverse. They pay you
Right.
the more people see your stuff.
Right.
So you're incentivized to create the kind of content that is going to get the eyes, and YouTube rewards you for that. And I feel like that's like the fatal flaw in Facebook. I guess it isn't a fatal flaw because it's a $1 trillion company now. I don't know.
There's still a ton of people on Facebook. The thing that I don't like about the YouTube model is that they decided to reward content creation over, or I don't even call it content. What would I call it? Creation over content. Like, because as long as you're producing a video once a week or twice a
Oh,
week or 3 times a week. It doesn't really matter if it's the same.
consistency over quality,
Yeah,
essentially.
it's people are incentivized to produce the exact same video
Mm-hmm.
said in a slightly different way. Like when you listen to talking head videos
Mm-hmm.
and they're posting every day, most of them are saying the same stuff. They're just preaching the same stuff, and it's a new video, and they reward that versus the guy who wants to go once a month or once every other month with
I,
really new
yeah.
content. Forget about it. They don't put you in the feeds for doing that, and I think that's, for me as a consumer, that's frustrating because I only want to hear from my content creators when they have something really new to share.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, there's that's you, but there's also other people who are like, um, having Will Terry be a part of my weekly routine is like, the
Right.
best thing for
Even
me
if he's
because
saying the same thing, I get
I
it.
just got to hear his voice.
Well, it's like
And
Dave Ramsey's radio program.
mhm,
Uh, it's the same show every time. He's telling people the same stuff.
this is very meta as we're doing the exact same
As
thing
we're
on
doing the
our
podcast where we've covered the same kind of topics. So
Okay, but I want to point out there's two things I want to just point out here for the person who's listening to this that's like, well, what the heck do I do? Okay. Number one, if you are still learning and you're not killing it with your art yet, like you're just still figuring out how to do it and you don't have a huge audience, I think you're best served to find one of these smaller communities like the SVS Learn community. I didn't mean for this to be a plug for SVS, but what we've built on SVS is so much like what I grew up in the early, like in the 2000s, with these forums where you could post without a ton of pressure. The cadence was doable. You could comment, you could make friends, those types of things, and you could really grow as an artist in this nice like nursery environment where it's very supportive and it's very engaging and people are real. And then once you feel like you've got the goods, like you really got an awesome style and you're starting to turn heads or a little bit, there's agents reaching out to you, stuff like that. There's people who are saying, hey, can you want to, can I interview on my YouTube channel? you know can You're getting the emails from students saying, I'm supposed to do a report on good artists, and I saw this book that you put out. Then I think go for it, knock yourself out, start an Instagram account and try to build a fan base that way. Do your YouTube channel, say, hey, roll up to YouTube and say, hi, my name's so and so, I've put out 3 books from these publishers and I just want to talk to you about what it's like to be a working illustrator, that sort of thing. The funny thing is you can get to that point of success in your career without social media. It has so much more to do, I think, with building friendships in the industry that you want to work in, more so than a huge social media follower. Like, you're going to be way more successful if you have 100 friends. Let's say you want to break into comics. Um, let's say you want to break into middle grade comics, like graphic novels, that type of thing. If you start making friends who are doing those things, and some might be super genuine friendships, some might be like acquaintances, but people are familiar with you, and editors and art directors are familiar with you because you've met them at book fairs, or you've met them at different Comic Cons, or you've met them at book signings, things like that, and you're getting out and you're meeting people. I think that will do more for you than if you had 100,000 followers on Instagram, you know, um, because what happens is, once they get to know you, once you get your foot in, once you get, you start to get a few projects under your belt and they see you've got a cool style, you're super reliable.
Mhm.
When anytime anybody's in a pinch and they're like, shoot, who do we get to do this thing? They think of you. Or someone might be like, well, I don't have time, but so-and-so I was just talking to does have time. You should contact them. And now you're on another person's radar and they're reaching out. It's all
Mhm.
about networking and friendshipping. And I think that actually can do you a lot more good than trying to play this social media game.
I agree.
True.
Good
Yeah.
stuff.
Anyway, should we take some questions?
Let's do it.
Okay. Question number 1 from Malachi. He wants to know, is AI cheating? Specifically, is it cheating to use AI to write a story for my comic or for my children's book or for my name your project? What do you guys think? Is that cheating?
Yep.
I think that's the wrong question.
Okay.
Because that begs a yes or no. Like, should I do this or not? I think the question is, it should be more like, what do I want in my involvement in the art world, in my creation? You know what I mean? Like, do you want to put out a story that the AI wrote? Because
it's a good point. Like, what could your connection possibly be to that story?
There's that. It didn't come from you. We tend to make better stories that came from us. I will say there will be a lot of people that will do that and will take it to market. And so you might, I mean, these are serious questions that you have to weigh out. But like for me, I don't want AI creating the art that I put out. Like the AI is getting good enough right now for our next game that we tested
Tested
it and wanted to see what the AI would do for the prompts that for the cards that we were trying to make. And it's amazing to me what the AI is coming out with. But I don't want to do that. Like I want people to see it and go, that's Will Terry stuff. Now, maybe in the future, I can feed it my work and it'll just basically do it for me. I'm not interested in that either, because I love the feeling of creating art and making that connection. So I think it's more like, what do you want? Do you want, and do you want to either have to lie and say you wrote it, but really AI did, and now you're robbing yourself, because every time you get a pat on the back for the story, you have to go, yeah, I didn't do that.
Well, I want to say there's different levels here too of using AI. So AI can be a writer, AI can be an editor, AI could be a research assistant, AI could be a different kinds of editor. So there's like a copy editor who's just making sure everything, like your prose, reads clearly, and make sure that everything's spelled correctly and that you're not using too many of the same words too many times in a row, right? But then there's also like a creative editor who can say, I get what you're trying to say, but the tone is off. I know you want to be serious, but you're actually sounding funny. That's another thing an editor does. So I could see you writing something and using AI as a tonal editor or as a copy editor. I could see you using AI as a research assistant. So let's say you have a storybook idea for, Santa Claus is too fat to fit in his suit, and it's called Santa's Too Fat. It's the children's book idea that you come up with, and you write it out. You might go to ChatGPT and say, all right, here's my picture book idea. Here's what I've written out. I've got it at 1,000 words. What could I do to get it down to 300 or 500 or something like that? And it might do a pass to help you like edit it out and weed it out. Now it gets a little blurry and of did you write it or did AI write it? And if you're working with an editor, did you write it or did the editor, help you write it? So what I would say is I wouldn't go to AI for like whole cloth, give me an idea. And, I've got an idea about a fat Santa, give me 6 ideas for a Santa Claus book. And then you just pick one of those and run with it. I would use it more as like research assistant, maybe help in editing and stuff like that. Because at the end of the day, we don't know if AI is here to stay, honestly. Like it could be something that, and this is sci-fi Jake's hat. Jake's wearing the sci-fi hat. It's a little tinfoily, but it could be that somehow AI gets outlawed, or somehow AI gets regulated, or somehow AI gets too expensive to use and you can't afford to use it, right? Like Meta, like, oh, you want to do AI, you want to use our top notch AI thing, well, it's $100 a week or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
um at some point you just don't want to be so reliant on something you don't have control over. And if 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 you have spent all of your time having it write your stories for you, and now you don't have access to it, and you have no experience writing stories, then what, what are you left with? uh, you've totally untrained yourself, whereas you could have been working this whole time on training yourself to become better and
Mm-hmm.
better at a thing, and actually gain a skill, instead of relying solely on something that to do a thing for
That's
you.
an interesting take on it. I could see that happen. I mean, that's sort of the drug dealer model, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that they give you the free sample. I'm just guessing at this from watching The Wire and other shows like that.
Yeah, never really participated.
But you get the free stuff, they get you hooked, and then they pull it unless you pay.
Mm-hmm.
That would be hilarious in a very sadistic way if that happened. People get all of a sudden a certain amount of success using this stuff and lying about it, and then all of a sudden they take it away and you have no ability.
Right. And I'd be worried too, like, okay, let's say you wrote Fat Santa, the Fat Santa comic, or Fat Santa children's book, with ChatGPT, and you put it out there. Well, what, like, there could be 5 other people doing the same thing. Like, somebody might go to ChatGPT and say, maybe this is like a gross misunderstanding of how ChatGPT works, but I I can't think that it's not spying on everybody, and like, oh, I know 5 other people over here are doing a Fat Santa book. I'll just write the same one for you.
Mm.
True.
It's a brave new world.
Mm-hmm. Fat Santa, like the ending of the book is he has to wear a sack because he's so fat.
Mm.
Sorry.
All right.
All right. Did we answer that question good enough?
I guess so.
Okay, next question. This comes from Emily. She asks, "Slow me down. I feel like I'm in a rush. By the way, I have ADHD." Okay. I know you had a neurodiversity podcast out lately, but I wanted to get your advice on how I can slow down when creating my art. I know the idea phase is creating, but I get this, but I get tense and rushed when I sit down to actually create and add details. I see artists spending weeks on a piece, but I feel like I need to finish the day I begin. Once finished, I store it in a binder and I don't want to look at it again or evaluate it. I know to improve, I need to assess and refine my art, but I just like to keep moving. I'm not selling my work or freelancing yet. I'm in my learning phase. Maybe once it becomes a career, I'll view things differently. You got to, first off, it's not going to change once it's one. You have to view it differently in order for it to become a career, I believe. Like that, you have to switch that around. The second thing is, to slow down. I feel like you have 2 options in front of you. You guys, I'll let you guys answer here, but just off the top of my head, you can either change your style so that you finish a piece in a day. So like Charles Schultz doing Peanuts, like he would do a strip a day. It's finished. It looks beautiful, right? It's a comic strip. It's black and white. It's beautiful, like wiggly lined artwork. He's got that style nailed down. So your option is to shift your style so that if it aggravates you and makes you uneasy and gives you anxiety to leave a piece unfinished at the end of the day, just make your art simpler and move your style in a way so that you can finish every day. The other thing is you have to be okay at the outset with, I'm just going to work on it for 2 hours today, and that's whatever I get done with in 2 hours, that's going to be like my done thing for today. And sort of shift your brain around thinking what actually is finished. Like the sketches, maybe you spend a full day on sketches and say that's, starting out telling yourself, if all I get done today are sketches, then that's good. And I'll come back to it. And the next day it's going to be tightening up those sketches. And the next day it's going to be a color pass, and the next day it's going to be a polishing pass. And just telling yourself start to finish, that's what that's going to be for that day. That's where I'm thinking with this.
Yeah, I mean that's a good plan. I can definitely speak to that because I may have a touch of ADHD, just a hair.
Full blown.
I got a lot of it, and so what Jake is saying is absolutely correct. But you want to. One of the things that just stands out to me about this is that feeling of being tense and wanting to rush to basically get into the detail phase. And what that particular sentence tells me is the prep work wasn't done. And so you're nervous the whole time. Is this piece going to come out or is it not going to come out? I mean, I've come from that a ton. When I was in school, like all of us have, we disregard what the teacher's saying when they say do so many studies and do so many sketches and stuff like that. And turns out they're right. I mean, if you do the sketch with especially, well, depending on what media you're doing, but if you do a value sketch and you like that sketch, that tense feeling tends to go away because you already know it's going to be good. And if you do a color study with that value study, well, now you've solved everything and you can truly relax even when the painting's not finished. Because if I just start painting with nothing, no prep work, I have no idea if this painting's going to come out. That tension starts to rise immediately. And you want to do something that shows that parts of it is finished, right? So you can feel good about it. Like, okay, that part's done and it looks okay. So you can continue on. That's not a good method of finishing something. And if you didn't do the prep work, maybe what you're nervous about is you're going to come back to it and not like what you did. And then that's even more of sort of a confirming, like a failure kind of pattern. Oh, I did it. I didn't plan on it. I don't like it now. I failed. Let's start again. Well, now you've got that as that's your pattern, right? And so now you're even more nervous. Am I going to fail on this next one? You set up that cycle and it's a very defeating cycle. So I would say to this person, you don't have to slow down on the work or anything like that. Just plan out the phases, like Jake was saying. I'm just in the sketch phase and that's all I'm worried about. And there's such beauty in that. Like I'm in a place, that's how I always start. I am in a play stage. I am not trying to get a great drawing right now. I'm just trying to get something down to see if I like even what I'm drawing at all, like the concept or anything about it. And there's no rules or there's no pressure for it to be finished or be great at that stage. I already know it. I almost want it to be ugly at that stage. So that's my take.
If you're wondering if your painting's going to turn out, it's not.
Right. That's a good way to put it.
And so like the master painter, the master artist, the master illustrator, before they start working, they know that because they've done it so many times, they're going to work the process and they're going to come out with something that they really love at the end. But they know it's not going to be, there's going to be some wrestling and some tug of war in there, but they're prepared for it, they're committed to it, and they're just going to see it through. And so you go through all those steps and you come out with something. It takes a long time to get there. It takes going through what this artist is describing of the anxiety, the wondering, the having to be finished in a day. I remember when I was in school, I could not work on a painting for more than, this is embarrassing, for like 2 or 3 hours. When I'd get an illustration assignment, I would almost always, like Lee said, I would ignore what my teachers were talking about, and I would start in on like the first or second idea I came up with. I'd draw it and I would draw it on my painting paper to save time, and then just start painting it and hate what I came up with almost always, hoping that it would come out and failing. And I was able to, over time, increase that to where I think the longest I ever worked on a painting was a little over 100 hours. Wow. I mean, I could never do that in the beginning. So it's a maturing process, and it's also the last thing I want to say before Lee's showing us his painting here is I think it's like there's a direct analogy to mastering anything. Like if you think about sports, like you think about tennis, you could choose to be a person who plays tennis recreationally. You could
Mhm.
choose to be a person who plays tennis at the club at that level. You could choose to be a person who plays tennis and enters tournaments. You could, but all the way up to, I want to be a pro tennis player. And I think if you want to make money as illustration, that has to be your goal, and you have to be comparing yourself to those people, and you have to get frustrated with the level that you're at, and hold your work up next to theirs and go, I didn't work long enough. I didn't design this well enough, which
Mhm.
means there's it's having problems with focal point. I didn't I didn't draw the characters well enough. I'm suffering from problems of anatomy. I didn't plan out the gestures well enough, so I'm suffering in storytelling. And I didn't, like this person said, stay with it long enough, and now I'm suffering from really rushed rendering that is inconsistent and is sloppy or messy.
Mhm.
And all of those things are things that you have to do a piece, and you can't skip this process. By the way, it's painful to become an artist, a really good artist. You have to go through phases of being sick and tired of your current output, and until you can get tired and even shed tears over your current output, you can't move to the next level, which is, I'm now going to spend twice as much time. Now I'm going to, a year or two later, I'm going to double that. And then it actually works backwards, because what you were spending 40 hours to do, you can now do in 30 hours. What you were now spending 30 hours to do, you can now do in 20 hours, right? Because you get more efficient, you get better,
Right.
and you get better at following your process.
Yep. Yep. What I wanted to show for those of you guys who are seeing this on YouTube is sort of the stages. I don't want to ever be somebody. I mean, the cool thing is all of us are working illustrators. We do this stuff that we're talking about. We don't just recommend it. So this is the last painting. If you go onto my Instagram, you can see that I did. But what I'm holding up is my color study. I just did it in Photoshop, and it's fairly finished. I mean, it has every bit of information that I'm going to need. I started with a little sketch, by the way, first. I don't have that ready to show here, but anyway, so I printed this color study out. It's everything that I need in terms of value, in terms of color, in terms of composition or whatever. And then I'll show up now is I printed out, it's a Photoshop file. Well, then I start doing swatches in watercolor to see
Mhm.
what that color balance is. And I'll do tons of those little ones. I've got a bunch of these. And then when I go to do this watercolor painting is huge. This is a full sheet of watercolor paper, 22 by 30
Mm-hmm.
watercolor
Ooh.
paper. And it was easy.
Mhm.
Because you did all that
Super.
preliminary work.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to paint something that big, you cannot make it up on the spot. It's 22 by 30 doesn't sound big, probably for an oil painter or acrylic painter.
Mm-hmm.
It's a full sheet of watercolor. And once you go that big, every technique changes because it's so big that by the time you get from one corner to the other, the first corner is already dry.
Mm-hmm.
So
in the life of that painting, how much money will you make off of that in prints and greeting cards and this, that, and the other?
I've calculated. I mean, the max potential is about 14,000 per image. I don't always make that. Some images don't sell well. Some images,
Mhm.
some are better than others. In other words, but
What's the low end?
The low end will be probably. I know I'll sell that original, so the low end on that would be $5,000 maybe.
And how much time do you think you have in it?
Total time
With all the
I'll
studies
say,
and everything.
yeah. So I'll even break that down. So about probably 2 hours of studies, just in pencil in my sketchbook. Then the color study, probably 2 hours. So that's 4 hours of prep work. Then another hour of just color testing on small swatches of watercolor. So that's 5 hours. And then probably 8 hours of painting that. So 13, 14 hours, somewhere around there.
That's a pretty good paycheck if you're going to get $5,000 minimum. Like,
How come you don't do that every day?
we lost bandwidth.
That's weird.
That's
It went.
the
I thought
punchline.
Lee
Here's
was
the,
having existential.
this was the crescendo, and then nothing.
Did
Well,
you hear my
for
question?
some reason, my thing timed out. I don't know what happened. What'd you say?
I just said, "How come you don't do that every day?" And there was just silence.
I do it every day. I mean, I'm already planning the next painting. I mean, I once I'm done with that one, I go right to the next one.
So you just make yourself a cool $5,000 every day.
Well, it doesn't happen because 14 hours. I'm not painting. I'm not doing that whole thing in one day. I can do one in addition to all the other work I do for SVS and chores and stuff and trying to get my kid to school. I do one a week.
One a week. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Because if you multiply that by 50, that's some number.
Yeah, and most of the originals do sell. I'd say probably I'm about at a 95% original sale rate.
Right.
Now, my question is, did you choose watercolor as your like medium of choice because it's a faster medium?
No, not at all. I
Okay.
chose it because I could find a smaller painting. But I chose it because of what happens. Here, I'll show this right here. I chose it because of that. Like basically when two colors are near each other and there's water involved, they merge together and like you couldn't paint some of this stuff in oil or acrylic.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally the paint and water combined with gravity doing its thing. And I love just watching that happen. There's an experimental nature to it that suits me. I can't stand. You know how some people like do coloring books to relax? Like there was that whole phase a little while ago for adult coloring books.
It's still going on.
Is it? Yeah. I'm not that person. It's so boring to have a sketch and be like, okay, now I'm painting that. Now I'm painting that. And you just don't get any unexpected things happening. But like when I'm painting in watercolor, I'll paint like the side of a building. And while the paint's still wet, I just pull a brush all the way through it. And I don't necessarily know what the paint's going to do. I mean, I'm anticipating the effect, but I don't know really what it's going to do.
Yeah.
So that's why.
Because I just asked that because I used to do like pencil rendering. Like I'd have to shade everything with pencil and do all that stuff. And I switched to ink, like brush pen type stuff because for this reason, I just wanted to be able to finish a piece in a day.
Well, there is something to that. I don't mind any of the mediums. I mean, I used to paint in oil and I like that. I like painting in acrylic too. But the one thing about those two is the prep work. Who has a full day to prep a canvas and gesso it and sand it? No, oh my gosh. When I sit down and want to paint something, I want to paint.
I hear you. Yep. And that's the thing with, even with brush pens, they replaced the dipping a brush in the ink well and then having to like wash that brush. I was like, oh, this is so much faster, so much easier, because I deal with some of that attention span stuff too. But I think the more, everybody listening, everybody within the sound of my voice, you have to get to the point where you've done so many drawings that you just don't care anymore. Like that's really I think the main problem, the main thing you see stopping people is they just haven't done enough. They don't just have enough like content of work that they put. I don't mean like content you post online, but I just mean like go get a stack of 500 sheets of paper and draw on every single one of them. Like try to do that in a couple months, right? Like just do a ton of drawing so that you get to the point where you can throw away a drawing and it doesn't hurt, it doesn't sting, because you have so much more in you because you've seen how much has already come out of you. And there was a stage in my career where I was just like, everything's so precious because, man, I bled for that piece of art. It's on that piece of paper right now, right there. And now like the blood is a lot thinner, I guess, because I could throw away any drawing I do now and not care about it. And because I know, oh, that drawing, whether it has 10 hours into it or 3 hours into it or 100 hours, I'm just like, well, I'm just 100 hours away from doing one just like it, or one even better than it. All right. Should we wrap it up there?
Wrap.
Okay.
Put a bow on it.
Put a little bow on it. You guys have been great. Co-host today.
You guys have
Thank
been a
you.
great attentive audience.
Yeah.
Not very disruptive.
Hey, when is this podcast coming out, Jake?
This one is coming out. I can tell you the exact date because I have it in my document here. It says, just got to pull it up, February 25th.
All right, you guys, let me announce real quick. I am doing, speaking of watercolor, a online week-long watercolor workshop starts in 1 week
right?
From the time you guys are hearing this. March 1st is the start date, and it goes for a week. There's a bunch of pre-recorded stuff, and then there's some live component as well. So check it out at svslearn.com. It's the first watercolor workshop I'm doing through SVS, which should be fun.
Awesome.
I'm excited. I mean, I'm so tempted to take it. I've been looking at your watercolors you're doing lately, and I'm like, geez, I gotta learn how to do that stuff.
Well, I can show you. It's pretty easy.
The secret is you just wet the paper, Jake.
Just put the paint on there.
That's it. Okay.
You guys want to tell a story?
Yeah, you got a story?
Yeah, I always have a story.
Do you want us to take us out and we'll do stories after
Okay,
that?
take us out and then we'll do stories.
Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. SVS or 3-Point Perspective is made possible by SVSLEARN. Where becoming a great illustrator starts. Your hosts today are Will Terry, Lee White. I'm Jake Parker. Podcast produced by Daniel Tu. Special thanks to our team, Preston Smith, Austin Shirtliff, Lily Howell, Lisa Fott, and Annalise Black. Now, go draw something. By the way, speaking of stories, you know how I told that story a few podcasts ago about me being in the back seat of the car and fearing for my life, and then getting in the front seat and driving it, and it really was just, I didn't tell it right. It wasn't, there's no punchline to the story or anything. It's like, and I drove and it was fine. The comments on that episode have been, here's how Jake should have done that story better. I got like 5 people saying, no, here's the way you should have told it.
That's a story
So
workshop in the comment section, huh?
I know, huh? All right, what's your story, Will?
All right. So growing up, my dad came from a money family, but his dad, my grandfather, died when he was 2. And so my dad's and his mom got cut out of all the money on Long Island. So we were scheduled to be rich, and we weren't. So that's like the first part of the story. Okay. But the rich people still like invited us up for Thanksgiving, and they
rich
invited
family members.
What's that?
The rich the ones that
the rich ones, on Long Island would invite us up to Thanksgiving in their mansions and stuff, right? So it was cool, right? Like not really, but like why does? And we would always have questions for Dad, like, what's going on? How come this is your family and you don't have any money? And as we got older, we kind of learned more of the story. But anyway, so this rich aunt and uncle of my dad's invited me and my sister, I was 12 and I think she was 13, to go on their yacht to Fire Island, right? And for the summer. And then my parents were going to come up and spend some time, and then we were all going to go home. So we didn't know them at all other than from Thanksgiving. So it was kind of scary. And they were going to be like our parents for a week, you know? And so they have us going to like the country club, which was super boring, and just all kinds of things. We did go to a Broadway play. And then we go to Fire Island, and we had fun. We went to the beach, did all this stuff. But then my uncle, great uncle, he drives the boat to empty out the black tank, the poo, you know?
Yeah, the bilge.
And they have like this thing that you hook up to, and I guess you pump it into this there's a pump that takes it into a tank or something. You put quarters in it. So he drives the yacht over there from his slip, drives it over there, gets it all ready. And think Rodney Dangerfield. That's this uncle, right? If you know Rodney Dangerfield, like he's like,
I can't get no respect.
He's
Wait, that was Elvis.
Totally that guy, right? And just like nothing like my dad at all. And so he puts all these quarters in there, sucks it out, and then he looks at his gauge after it's all done, he's like, got that done. We're going to go back and park in our spot again.
Mm-hmm.
And we park in the spot, and he goes, what? And he looks at the gauge, and it didn't pump it out. It like made all the sounds like it was pumping it out, but the tanks were full. And he's all, oh, F it. And he pumped it out into the harbor. And there were kids swimming on the other side of our
Oh
boat.
my
Meanwhile,
gosh.
toilet paper and other unmentionable things are floating to the surface. And I'm like telling him, I'm like, Uncle Ray, there's kids over here. And he's like,
Oh, man.
Wow.
So that's a story
So
that happened.
I have a feeling like that story just encapsulates so much about our world today.
Uh-huh.
Little metaphor.
a little too on the nose there, Will Terry. Let me ask you this: what kind of yacht was it? Was it like
it was a 42-foot Uniflight. I remember this because I was like enamored.
Yeah.
It had a bow cabin and an aft cabin.
Mm.
Like, you know, the fishing boats that have like the open back part where you fish out of.
Yeah.
It didn't have that. It was raised up there, and there was a nice stateroom under that. It was a nice boat.
Yeah. I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I've seen those.
Yep.
That's cool. How old were you when you did that?
12.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a core memory.
It was pretty cool. But there was some racist things that happened that were not cool from my uncle. And I mean, just like stereotypical things that you're like, yep. Like
Everybody's got that uncle. Sadly. It's like the same cartoon uncle.
Right.
Different
All
time.
right, so normally we have some kind of theme to our stories, but now I don't know how to add to that one.
Yeah. How do you add to that one?
Yeah.
That's a tough. I have a near-death story that you guys may or may not have heard.
Let's hear it.
Another one?
I bet it involves a wheel of some kind.
It's a lot. This one doesn't involve a wheel.
Okay.
This is nothing about my own fault, but this is probably the closest to death that I've ever come, just in an accidental kind of way.
That you know of.
That I know of. Yeah, there's other times. I swear, there was one time I was surfing that I know that there was a great white in the water. And it was just overwhelming feeling all of a sudden. I was out with one other person, my friend, and I was with him. We were by ourselves in this ocean in Northern California, right near where the seal sanctuaries are. Yeah. This is not the story, by the way. This is a secondary story you just prompted me into. Anyway, both of us at the same time turned to each other and we're like, there is a shark in the water. We didn't see it, but both of us felt it, and we paddled out. So anyway,
yeah.
So I wouldn't have known about that one, but this one actually did happen. And correct me if I'm already told this story. I don't know, but the day before school started in 7th grade, I was awoken from. I was sleeping, and I got stung by something, and really, really bad on the back of the arm. And so that was how I just woke up, and I'd rolled over onto something. I don't know. We thought, probably a wasp or a bee or something like that. Yeah. I yelled for my dad. He came up there. We couldn't find it or anything. And so, my mom and dad go into work, and I was just kind of really hazy feeling at that point, but I just woken up too. So not unusual by any stretch.
Yeah.
And, they left for work, both my mom and my dad. And all of a sudden my lips started to swell. And I have a twin brother, as you guys have heard before. And he started sort of making fun of me. And then all of a sudden hives started to appear all over my body.
Oh, wow.
And my lips were becoming huge. And all of a sudden I couldn't breathe. Or I was having trouble sort of getting air, but it was just closing. It wasn't like I couldn't breathe at all at that point, but all of a sudden my air was different. Like I knew.
Yeah.
And, it went from being like funny to being really serious all of a sudden. Yeah. And there's no cell phones back then. There was nothing. It was just like, this is happening. We had I was getting ready to be a 7th grader. I had no idea what was going on.
Right.
And we lived in the country. There was nowhere to go. There was nothing to do. And my dad just randomly happened to forget something that he needed to take to work. He comes home. I walk out in the driveway, and I could just still remember his face, like his eyes just getting huge, and him throwing me in the back of the car
Wow.
and flooring it to the hospital. And then by the time I got to the hospital, I was taking like one breath, and I would just hold the breath if I could get it in, because I
Wow.
couldn't breathe at all. And they put 4 IVs in me,
Yeah.
and just like one in my wrist, both wrists, one in each kind of, you know, elbow area. And obviously I made it,
Yeah,
but it was so close. Anyway, to put the period on this story, the cap at the end, about a year later, I'm cleaning out my room. We're rearranging my room or whatever. And we found a little group of dead scorpions under my bed, like little
Whoa.
brown scorpions that exist in the South. You know, it's
Whoa.
not
Oh, man.
tiny, but they pack a huge punch. And so now I'm thinking that's what it was. And that's why we couldn't find it. It wasn't flying around like a bee or a wasp.
Wow.
It was a scorpion.
Yeah. Well, and obviously you're allergic to it too. It wasn't just
Yeah. I mean, if it was a full load of whatever venom it was, I'm just guessing that it was the scorpion. I never found what it was.
Did
but,
the did the wound like? I mean, did it like start to go necrotic at all? Like, did you lose any
that's
tissue?
spiders.
Yeah.
No.
That's
It's
why I was
it's not
wondering if
that.
it was a spider, because like a black widow will like leave you with a pretty good wound.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they were looking for right when we got there. They were testing it out or whatever, but it was a single sting. So it wasn't like 2 fang punctures. So it had to be either a bee, wasp, or some kind of stinging thing that just popped me.
Did you like the Scorpions in high school?
Did I?
Did you listen to their music, or were you against?
That's why I became a heavy metal rocker.
Were you against the Scorpions from your childhood trauma?
I mean, I rock you like a hurricane. That's all I'm saying.
I've been stung by a scorpion before too.
I bet, because you live in like where they live, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. We actually went around the yard just before the weather changed cold, because the scorpions either die or I don't know what they do during the winter. But we went around the yard with a black light. We found 24 in our
You
backyard.
showed me that when I went to your house.
Yeah.
I had never knew about that, and then you're like, yeah, you can just use a black light. I think you just.
Well, do you guys remember when we rented the house when we all got together and we went out back and we found a couple with the black light? So
yeah, it's crazy. Anyway, the thing stung me on the foot, and my foot was numb up to like my knee. I couldn't feel anything for like a half a day.
Wow.
So they definitely pack a punch, but you didn't have an allergic reaction, obviously.
They're not messing around. No,
You
no allergic
on it?
reaction. I don't. So my neighbor's pool pump, malfunctioned and was like shooting water in the air, and then also flooding everything in their backyard. And they were out of town on vacation, and so I opened the gate, and all this water came rushing out across my feet, and so all the scorpions that were hiding in cracks were like floating in the water.
Oh,
nice.
Just got me.
One got you going by.
Yep.
Wow.
Like, oh.
Just a drive-by pop.
Yeah. So I appreciate that, Mr. Scorpion. Thanks a lot.
It's like all of a sudden you're on stage. Your sound sounds like you got the echo of like you're on a big.
You were sounding like that earlier too.
Oh, interesting.
Wonder what the deal is. Anyway.
Huh.
I'll tell my turn to tell a story.
Yep.
Okay. This weekend I volunteer with a group of boys every week, and just to like we take them and do camping. It's kind of like scouts but not scouts. So this last week we took 9 boys to a cave. It was me and 3 other dads and then 9 boys, and there's this cave called Pepper Sauce Caves down by Tucson. And I was like, I didn't know what to expect. You know, I heard, oh, it's muddy, and the guy I was going with who'd been there before, he's like, yeah, well, I'm like, how long will we be in the cave? And he's like, probably 2 hours. I'm like, 2 hours? How can you spend 2 hours in a cave? Well, the cave's like a mile deep.
Wow.
Right. And so we get in there, you have to like, you know, get on your hands and knees to get in, and then it opens up, and I was like, this is so cool. And then there's like this tiny little like opening that's maybe 2 feet long, but maybe 1.5 feet tall, that you have to get on your belly to crawl through to get into the rest of the cave. And
oh gosh.
And so we crawled through that, and it was incredible. It really was like Lord of the Rings, where the goblins live underground. Like there's these vast like openings, and there's these pools of water and all this stuff. And we're going around, and I'm like kind of claustrophobic. Like I'm on the claustrophobia spectrum for sure, right? But I'm keeping it together because I'm like, I know how to get out. I know exactly where it is. Like we're gonna be fine. So we're going through, and then Ken, the friend I was with, he's like, "Oh, we need to go down the rabbit hole." I'm like, "What's the rabbit hole?" He's like, "Oh, it's fun. It's this tunnel that goes to the back of the cave."
Don't do it.
And so, sure enough, I find myself being the last guy in this line, going down the rabbit hole, and there were parts where, the space was all diagonal and slanted, and so you had to like crawl sideways. There were parts where you had to like go in and like weave under things and crawl. And my light's starting to get like fading because the battery, I thought I had fresh batteries, but I guess I didn't. So now my light's fading. My backup light is like clicking off when I click it on. And I'm starting to imagine every fatal possibility that, like, I'm imagining what if all of a sudden it starts raining somewhere and the cave floods?
Mm-hmm.
What if there's an earthquake? And what if there's just a shift and rocks fall? What if we run out of oxygen? What if there's giant spiders? What if there's goblins? Like, I'm imagining everything. And finally we get, and it's starting to get hot too in the cave, because the deeper you go, sometimes caves get really warm.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like taking off, I just have a t-shirt on now, and I'm just like sweating profusely. And I don't have water with me because we left our bags like where it was more open, where you're not get. And so I just volunteer. I'm like, "Hey, I know some of us are thirsty here. I'll take a group back to the front so we can go get drinks and stuff." And 6 of the boys were like, "I'm coming." Like, let's go. And one of the other dads was like, "Yep, let's go." And so we start going back. And this is when I got the scaredest, was going back through. Some people had like carved arrows, so you know where to go. And some people had gone in. I think these were like professional cavers or people from the state or something, who put in little reflective arrows. So you always knew where to go, but you could miss them, and they weren't everywhere. And the scariest part was twice I'm leading everybody back, and I go the way I think I'm supposed to go.
Oh no.
And I'm crawling, and I'm getting through, and all of a sudden, dead end. And I'm like,
Dude.
"Everybody stop, turn around." We went down the wrong path,
Oh my
the wrong
gosh.
tunnel. So we turn around, and I have to like, get my wits together and be like, "Okay, let's try that one." So we go down that one, crawl, cinch, and then dead end. I'm like, "Oh no, we're trapped in here."
Oh my
And
gosh.
so we turned back around, and then one of the boys was like, "Hey, look at that. There's this tunnel right here." And I realized there was a part when you're going in, you don't realize all the twists and turns that you're
Yep.
making. And sure enough, there's this one part where you had to like look behind you and go up that way. And if
Oh
he
my
hadn't spotted
gosh.
that, I'd still be in there.
This just happened like last week,
It was just Saturday. It
dude.
was just Saturday. So finally we get, we make our way out. When I saw the ladder, for the rabbit hole, the entrance, there's a ladder down into it. When I saw that ladder, I was just like, "Okay."
Wait, when was this? This was
Saturday.
Oh my gosh. Okay, public service announcement. Everybody get out of the caves.
Okay.
It's just like such common sense. Don't go in the caves. Don't go in there.
Did you have 3 sources of light?
I brought a headlamp and 2 flashlights.
Okay.
But
everybody should have 3 sources of light.
Everybody should stay out of the caves. That is the only metric there. Don't go in the caves.
Not everybody brought those. So I had to give one of my flashlights to one of the boys because his headlamp was left somewhere. And so my last 2 were like dying on me. And at one point, you turn off all the lights just to like experience the darkness, but that's fun. But then when it's forced on you,
No. We have a lot of mining stuff around here, obviously being in Denver, and there's a lot of gold mining tours and all this stuff. And every time we pass them when we're on a trip, my wife looks over so expectantly and so kind of happy and giddy. She's like, "Oh, we should go check that out." And I'm like, "Nope, I'm not going in a cave." That's just sort of my policy. Like, I'm
The
pretty
rule.
fearless in other things, but I'm not going in a cave. There is no cave I want to go in. Not
See,
one.
I'm claustrophobic, and it
Me
developed
too.
more in as I became older. So like
Mhm.
now I have a rule: no caves. I'm with you.
No
Like,
cave.
Mm.
See,
but when I
Will's
was a
on board.
scout, we before I knew about claustrophobia so much, I went in a cave, and mine wasn't so much about claustrophobia, even though we did have to squeeze through some things that I had to put in a partition of my mind that was like quarantined because I knew
Mhm.
I had to go back through it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And even at like 14, every time I think about it, I'd start getting a panic attack. So I would just like
Yeah.
I'd quarantine it.
Yeah.
But there was one spot where you had to walk down like a little 4-foot ramp in the cave,
Mhm.
like just a steep angle. And if you
Mhm.
tried to walk down it slow, you'd slip because it was wet and fall and
Yeah.
get all muddy. So I'm watching the guys go before me, and everyone slip, boom, their hands are all muddy. I hate muddy hands, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have this brilliant idea when it's my turn. I'm on a giant step down and run down it.
Yeah.
And I run down it, and then all of a sudden I see all these lights, and I see all these faces in my face. And
Mhm.
they're all going, "Are you all right? Will, are you all
Oh,
right? Are you all right?"
yeah.
Oh no.
There was
Did
a
you
stalactite that I didn't see at the bottom of it that I just ran. We had helmets.
Uh-huh.
I would be dead today, but I ran right into that, and it knocked me out. I was laid out
Oh my
on the
gosh.
ground. So all I remember is taking that giant step, and then everybody's just in my face going, "Are you all right?"
Yeah. So did you like hit your face on it or
I was looking down, so I hit my head right here
oh,
on the top of
yeah.
my head. I had the
Man,
helmet,
you're so
and also you
lucky.
have that helmet visor, so you can't
Yeah.
see up. I couldn't see
Yeah.
it in
Oh,
front,
right.
and it's dark, you
Right.
know.
Yeah. The weird thing is as panicked as I got and as like, crazy as it felt, I still kind of want to go back. I want to do it again. So I don't know
So
what that
stay out of the cave.
I don't know.
If you want to listen to like one of the craziest cave stories like
The
that,
Nutter Butter one or the Nutty
well, there's
Buddy.
that, but the Nutty Putty, the one they sealed up with the guy in Utah that is in there for life. No, there's one on the Rogan podcast
Mm-hmm.
with Cowboy Cerrone. I can't remember his first name, but he's a UFC
Mm-hmm.
fighter, and he got into underwater cave
I
diving.
listened to that one.
Oh my gosh!
Underwater caving.
Yeah,
That's a no.
like so
Oh yeah.
you got the deep breathing apparatus and everything, and you're underwater in a cave, and so all these things that scare you about just being in a cave, but then there's on top of it you're scuba diving, and oh my gosh, his story is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll probably go listen to it again. I don't know
How
why.
claustrophobic are you, Will? Like, do you get claustrophobic? Say, for example, if you're like I'm really claustrophobic, and sometimes if I'm sleeping and I'm trapped sort of in my blankets, I kind of start freaking out.
I'm worse.
I'm not that
I
bad.
I had a panic attack 2 years ago on an airplane. That's how claustrophobic.
Mm,
I full on. I was 70% to 80% of complete like freaking out. Like get me out of here. Like TSA going, yeah, you're not flying anymore.
Get off the plane.
And it was a series of unfortunate events. It was the plane. So my wife booked us on like you don't get your seat.
oh
So
right.
naturally I got put on a window, which she knows never to do this ever again. Like
Uh-huh.
I need an aisle. But so the window seat, especially like if you're a big man like me and then you have another big man sit next to you,
Mm-hmm.
basically
That's rough.
sitting on your lap in there,
Yeah.
on top of you. And then the plane, the air conditioning was broken. So I hear the flight attendant before we were leaving. I go up there to see if I can get an aisle seat. And while I'm waiting to talk to the lady at the gate, that one comes off the plane that just landed, our plane,
Mm.
and she goes, "This is going to be one of those flights." And I'm like, now I'm tuned in. Like, what does that mean? And she goes, that it's the AC. And so when
Oh
we
no.
get in there, the pilot goes, "Hey, here's the problem. It doesn't work on the ground, but what we can do is bring fresh air in from outside
Yeah.
when we're at 30,000 feet." And it's like 0 degrees up there, right?
Uh-huh.
So they actually have to modulate how much they bring in, and because they can totally cool the plane down. But on the ground, and it was, I grew up in Maryland in humidity.
Mm-hmm.
You get all those people in there with no air conditioning in July, and we were taking off in Phoenix.
The sweat box.
It was like being in a rainforest. Plus I'm claustrophobic, so I'm sweating bullets, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And they had one of those. It was a wide body, and they had the luggage thing that came down over our 3 seats.
Yeah.
And it made like a tunnel that went clear out. Like I was down inside this. And it was just down waiting for people to put their luggage in there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm way back in there, big guy next to me sitting on me, and my mind starts doing all the stuff that yours does, Jake. It's like, what, like you can't, so I can't, my claustrophobia is when I can't change my situation.
Right.
I almost freak out. Like,
yeah,
I started thinking, what if it's stupid stuff? Like, what if the landing gear busts on my side of the plane and we just fall down even further, and now he's on top of me?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he can't even get out, right?
Yeah. Every scenario.
And then there's a fight that breaks out. I mean, my mind is working overtime to destroy me.
What if there's snakes on the plane?
It's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy what your mind will do. I'm like, seriously, like, what if there's a group of people that go, one of the things in my mind was, what if a group of people like hijack the plane right now and say, no one's getting off? And I'm already in almost freak out, like Bolt mode.
Yeah.
And actually, the flight attendant came by and I said, I need to talk to you for a second. I got his attention, and it was a totally packed flight. And I go, I need you to know I'm 70% to freaking out right now, like from claustrophobia. He's like, oh, like, what do I do? You know? And he goes, this flight's totally full. And I'm like, if there is an aisle, I'll do anything. I'll pay any amount of money to upgrade to it. Whatever there is, I need an aisle seat. And he's like, I can't do that. I'm like, is there any way that one of you guys could switch with my wife up here so she could give me the middle seat and her take the window and stuff? Well, as it worked out, I stayed on the window. Long story short, we got up in the plane. When the temperature came down, it changed a lot.
Yeah.
I on that flight, I was 50% the whole time.
Yeah.
I was 40 to 50%. I was like,
as it was building, did you go through that process where you're trying to talk yourself out of freaking out? It's always a funny moment.
Constantly, I was like right on the edge. And then when we landed, the heat came in, the humidity came in again, and we had to wait for everybody. And it just took forever for people to deplane. And then I see like people in front of, like, I'm about to freak out, and people getting their luggage are like, oh, you go first. No, you go first. No, really, you go first. And I'm like going, get off the plane, you know?
You have to at some point just be like, well, this is how I die.
I kind of was. I was like,
this is it.
It's a slow death though, Jake, and it's not fun.
No.
It's
no.
I can handle the
claustrophobia is a really weird one.
I can handle the aisle because I can stand up whenever I want, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can choose to stand up.
Right.
I can't do that when there's a big mouth breather right next to me.
No.
Yeah.
That feeling of freaking out is not good, man. It's, I mean, I know what you mean. Well, when you can't change your situation, I didn't know that I had anxiety in that way. I knew I was claustrophobic, like in the caving situation. I know that I'm claustrophobic,
right.
But it goes farther for me that I've had to sort of accept a certain amount of that. Like I realized at a certain point, I can't remember where we were, but I lived in LA and we were in just at a public event, and I could leave anytime I want to. So it wasn't necessarily that, but we were with a bunch of people that I don't know. The whole crowd we didn't really know the people. And so all of a sudden I would be in a conversation with a group of people that I don't know without any of my people I went with being there. And so I felt trapped in the conversation and started having panic attacks.
Oh man.
Cause I'm like, I don't know how to get out of this conversation.
Get away from these people.
Right.
Yeah, it's like a dream.
And it's really weird. And I had to, I started to go through those steps like you're talking about, Will, where you're like, wow, I'm feeling kind of funny right now. Am I sweating? Like what's happening?
Yeah. That's intense. Should we wrap it up there?
We should.
Let's wrap.
Okay. We already did the outro, so that's it.
That's nice, Will. Wait, what was that?
You already did the outro. This is my sticker pack for.
That's cool. I love that Yeti.
And
Should have been eating spaghetti.
And then I got look at what Anthony did on my cards. So these are the greeting cards.
Lovely. So cool.
Yeah, man.
And then here's the back.
God, I just wish I would have had that by
Yeah.
Christmas. But
Yeah, I know. It's coming.
2025. That's your year.
And then here's the all the ornaments.
got all the stuff.
Yeah. So they're all
Very cool.
Oops.